Rashard Mendenhall, who's just 26 years old, is retiring from the National Football League. Now, when I told a friend, when I got the score alert to my phone, his initial reaction was the same as mine for some reason, which is, really? Rashard Mendenhall? The guy who went to Niles West, was a first-round pick, went to 2 Super Bowls, went to the University of Illinois. University of Illinois produces fine talent, yet they don't have coaching, side note. And in case you weren't knowledgeable on the U of I. But he wrote a piece for the Huffington Post Sports, and it's a very, very good piece. So again, Mendenhall, 26 years old, retiring from the National Football League. I'm going to read a few excerpts to you guys and Ben, and then Ben will react. One of them was basically on being called a dumb N-word. Here's what he said. I'm not a terribly sensitive person, so this stuff never really bothered me. That wasn't until I realized that it actually had an impact. It actually had an impact on my career. Over my career, I would learn that everything people say behind these computers and smartphones actually shape the perception of you, the brand, the athlete, and the person. Go figure. So what do you think when you hear that from Rashard Mendenhall?
Rashard Mendenhall is an interesting guy. You know, remember that in 2011...
The 9/11 truther.
Yeah, when we killed Osama bin Laden.
You're not going to do it in the John Cena voice as we covered?
Rashard Mendenhall had a very interesting... He was interesting for half his tweet, and then he was kind of crazy for the other half of his tweet. His first tweet read, "What kind of person celebrates death? It's amazing how people can hate a man they've never even heard speak. We've only heard one side." The first part of it is outstanding. What kind of person celebrates death?
Right. If it was cut off there, then we would...
Yeah, and it's amazing how people can hate a man they've never even heard speak.
We've seen him speak a few times.
We've seen him speak a few times, and we know what he did. But I'm even going to let that go. And then we.
Oh, you're going to let that go?
I'm half willing to let that go.
You're not letting that go.
But I'm certainly not going to let. We've only heard one side. Like when you put those 2 things together, like, and then he left the reservation on other tweets. We'll never know what really happened. I have a hard time believing a plane could take a skyscraper down demolition style. Well, it did. Yeah, I love how people with absolutely no engineering background, no aviation background, no jet fuel background, no firefighting background. I have a hard time believing it. I'm like, all right, well, you know, pick up Popular Science, read their analysis of it, and then be like, oh, that's how it happened. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Look at that. That's what happened. So,
but he has doubts. It's okay.
But anyway, his tweets reflected, wrong-headed as they may have been, an interesting and I think really good sentiment at the beginning, which is,
I agree.
I'm super uncomfortable with people jumping up and down celebrating death, even if there was a moment where 2 Americans might hug each other after that, but it would not be we just won the Super Bowl hug. It would be, hopefully this is the end of a chapter hug. You know?
Sure.
And so I liked that idea.
I did too, yeah.
But the rest of it was kind of nuts. But his pieces, so he is not a typical athlete
no.
in any way.
Not at all. So on the ever-changing NFL landscape, today, game day cameras follow the most popular players on teams. Guys who dance after touchdowns are extolled on Dancing with the Stars. Games are analyzed and brought to fans without any use of coaches' tape. Practice non-participants are reported throughout the week for predicted fantasy value, and success and failure for skill players is measured solely in stats and fantasy points. Very true. This is a very different model of football than the one I grew up with. My older brother coaches football to youth and high school level. One day he called me and said, "These kids don't want to work hard. All they do is look cool, celebrate after plays, and get more followers on Instagram." I told him that they might actually have it figured out. And that's true. I mean, look, as non-NFL players we did a fantasy football show for a while. It's incredibly true. All we do as a society, especially in the fantasy society and just fan society, is measure them based on fantasy value. And plus, fantasy football is the #1 fantasy sports, you could say, #1 subject and category in fantasy sports, because the season is short and they only play once a week. So I mean, I totally understand where he's coming from, and how the game day cameras, like with Chad Ochocinco/Johnson, he got he was a great player, but he got a ton of attention because of what he did after he scored or after a play. And now guys, I'm forgetting. Gale Sayers even said, "Why are they celebrating after a sack, after a tackle for loss, after a 1-yard gain? The guy who tackled him is celebrating." So I totally understand what he's saying.
Yeah, I think the celebrations, the on-field celebrations, are silly. I don't think that it should be 1955 where there were none. But I think we've reached a uncomfortable extreme on the other end.
And at the same time, I'm not okay with penalizing guys for celebrating a touchdown. I still think that's incredibly dumb.
But it does seem silly, and that makes you feel old when you think that. I no question. But
so it's clearly, with Rashard Mendenhall, not to cut you off, it's clearly carrying over to the youth level. It sounds like.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, because that's where the TV cameras go, and that's what. Again, it seems like fun. It's celebratory. People like seeing that. So, I don't think it's that big a deal. I don't think that it translates into anything because guys celebrate all the time. Does it mean they're not working hard in practice? I doubt it. Players are better now than they used to, which means I think it means they're practicing more and harder. And most professional athletes will tell you, you talk to players in the 70s, sometimes they had other jobs in the off season. Now these guys, they just work.
Sure.
They work and they work. So on one side, I hear what he's saying. I don't think what he's saying is true. I don't think the result of what he's saying is true. Like, I don't think it leads to people who don't care as much.
Okay.
I don't think that's the case. I think we just have to live with the celebrations, and it's not that big a deal. I also think that, there are significant outlets of really thoughtful NFL analysis. And it may be, we do fantasy shows and we talk about fantasy stuff here. Sure, there's a lot of that, no question.
Yeah.
But you watch the NFL Network or listen to NFL radio.
Yeah.
NFL radio is highbrow NFL analysis. These guys don't talk about fantasy stuff at all. They literally talk about the things that he talks about there, about blitz pickups. And you read all the time when fans get a good young running back on the team and they're like, why doesn't that guy play more? We all know what the answer is. It's always that answer. Because he doesn't know how to protect the quarterback right now. And we may have a guy in there getting 3.1 yards a carry, but Lord knows he knows how to pick up the blitz. So I'm sympathetic. I just don't think he's right in the end.
Here's the one thing about the NFL Network, and I agree with you. They have fantastic analysis and whatnot.
What's the ESPN Daily Show during the NFL season?
NFL Countdown.
Yeah,
but here's
the Daily Show, like it's whatever. It's on in the afternoon, but like
prime time. I mean,
yeah, I don't know, whatever it is. The NFL, the ESPN's, Jaworski. All Jaworski does is break down film. There's a lot of that goes on.
Sure, there is. But speaking to your point about the NFL Network, and I mean, this is not a bad thing. I'm just saying, on the bottom line or on the side, they have fantasy points, fantasy point value, like who's predicted to be, top 5 and whatnot. So it's out there even from the mainstream.
No question.
So on retirement, here's what he said.
Just a few more. NFL radio, which is remarkable.
Retirement-wise, so when they ask me why I want to leave the NFL at the age of 26, I tell them that I've greatly enjoyed my time, but I no longer wish to put my body at risk for the sake of entertainment. I think about the rest of my life, and I want to live it with much quality. And physically, I am grateful that I could walk away feeling as good as I did when I stepped into it.
Well, that's why you got to like a guy like Rashard Mendenhall. That's great stuff, and I give him a pass largely on those earlier tweets. They seemed foolish, but again, I like a guy who's at least thinking.
I no longer wish to put my body at risk for the sake of entertainment. I mean, that's pretty strong. I think that's pretty good.
I mean, yeah, your body was at risk for the sake of entertainment the last few years.
Sure, but at 26, I mean, he's way ahead of the curve, it appears. By the way, lastly, on popularity.
He's not, and he's given up some money. It's not like this isn't Barry Sanders we're talking about, but he's still giving up money.
No, definitely. And at 26, I mean, again, he's still very young. Popularity and staying true to himself. Here's what he said. Basically, on his Twitter page, they said that he isn't sporty enough. So they questioned, do you love the NFL? Do you like competing? Here's what he said. I am not an entertainer. I never have been. Playing that role was never easy for me. The box deemed for professional athletes is a very small box. My wings spread a lot further than the acceptable athletic stereotypes, and conformity was never a strong point of mine. My focus has always been on becoming a better me, not a second-rate somebody else. Sometimes I would suffer because of it, but every time I learned a lesson from it. And I'll carry those lessons with me for the rest of my life.
All right, good for him. Godspeed. Hope he does well.
Okay, and that's how we'll end that.